What's up, Dragon Ball Super family? I'm Legends Michael Carrick, and I'm bringing you my Cooler Mill deck profile from this weekend's um, regional up in Kissimmee, Florida. It was awesome. I placed fourth with it, only losing to launch on a misplay by my own accord. I offensively used my Whis, and then I left myself with no untap when he went for game. So that was a really good game, though, and I learned definitely from that, and I took that knowledge with me through the rest of the weekend. I played like three Gogeta, blue yellow Gogetas, and that match just feels unlosable in this deck. They don't have any threats that like you can't kill, and like they don't have enough threats to like rush you down. Plus, their leader always gets blocked in this matchup, so they never get to triple strike you. It just seems tough, and they're drawing a bunch of cards anyway, so it feels unlosable. Of course, if they draw their Android 17 and you don't draw Jiren, then that's like the way to lose it. Played against 21 this weekend, the set 2021. That was a good matchup. He played it really well, but he just ran out of threats, and I even survived a perfect force cell with the deck, and then just kept coming through and winning out the game. Also matched into a Bardock Prismatic, Yellow Ape Goku, and if I forgot something else that I matched, definitely let me know. But it was definitely an awesome weekend. Super fun playing this deck. If you've been following me for a little bit, you know that I absolutely adore this leader and the way this leader plays, and just this color combo, really. So in front of you, you have the entire deck list. If you want to stick around for the how-to play and the tips and tricks for this deck, feel free. It's probably going to be one of those longer videos. You guys know I love talking about Cooler, and we got just so many tools for this deck that I can't wait to go over some of the tips and tricks for this deck. Shout out before I begin. I usually do my shout outs at the end, but big shout out to Patrick Derillo. I hope I pronounced that right. I watched him play Cooler at a few regionals back, and he showed me some things with the deck that I definitely took from this. So in my previous Cooler videos, I used to talk about how you should just gun yourself to 4 so that you can take advantage of the card advantage. But watching Patrick play and learning to defend at a high life, like 6 or 7 life, right away, and just trading boards with your opponent like you're a normal leader, is actually really good. You don't need to be able to deal damage with the leader on the front side, right? Like you can just keep swinging your front side leader at your opponent's leader, keep drawing the card, and that's okay because that's all you really want out of the leader anyway. And then another thing I learned from him is that like just killing your opponent with your battle cards and your Z battle cards is just as powerful as milling your opponent out. Granted, I didn't kill many people this weekend. I milled all of my opponents out, but it was really good to learn from him. And then some of the tech choices I took from him as well, such as like the Android 17Z battle card, and really put it to good use. So yeah, let's hop right into the deck profile. So Kula Mill, it's a red leader from set 9. Every time your opponent's battle cards has their power reduced by one of your cards, they place the top card of their deck in their drop area. And then if that power is reduced by one of your battle cards specifically, I might have said that incorrectly before, but if it's specifically reduced by one of your battle cards, then the first time that happens, you also draw a card. And that, on the front side, that only happens on your opponent's turn, and then on the back side, it happens during either player's turn. So that's pretty cool. And then the other big difference between the front side and the back side is on the front side, your leader has to swing at your opponent's leader to draw the card, whereas on the back side, it can swing at anything to draw the card. So that's pretty cool. It got a bunch of anniversary box support, and I'll definitely point it out as we go. So as usual, we'll start with our early game mulligan. So this it's not a linear deck. You can't just look for like the lines return 1, 2, and 3, which is something I enjoy playing. But there are some things you do want to find early game, right? So we'll start with the new anniversary box cooler. It's a check land as long as you are this leader. So obviously you want to mulligan for this in your opening hand, but it's not like you're gonna full mulligan for that in your opening hand. If you find any Frieza Clan 5-drop or Frieza Clan multicolor card, you can keep that in your opening hand as your first energy. Obviously, it's ideal if you open with this card because then it lets you play this card on 1. But if you don't open with this card, it's not like you should throw away the rest of like the ideal opening hand pieces just to go find it. And the reason we really want to find a Frieza Clan multicolor is so that we can play this card if we need to on turn 2. So yeah, so we'll look for these. If we have copies of this, we'll look for this copy of this as well, because this card is just as good as on turn 2 as it is turn 1. Like it is nice to get that early plus, but it's not a big deal. If you don't, you just play it on turn 2, and it still stalls your opponent out. This and then we'll also look like there's a lot of cards we want in our opening hand. It's so funny, and it's kind of shocking how well you can sculpt your opening hand if you just mulligan with the right like idea or goals in mind. The next thing we want in our opening hand is a copy of this new Anniversary Frieza, so I'll take a moment to talk about it. This Anniversary Frieza is when this card is played, you get to add up to one of your life to your hand, and then choose up to one of your opponent's battle cards, and it gets minus 5k for the turn. That part's pretty cool, right? Like on your front side, they mill a card. On the back side, they mill a card. You draw a card, and sometimes that 5k is exactly what puts them in range of dying, like that battle card. That comes up often versus the Gogeta SCR. You'll bring it down from 40k to 35k, then you'll do 2 arrivals to kill it. We'll talk about that later. And then its auto is what's really cool. It's a limit 1 auto. When this card attacks or is comboed from your hand, you get to combo with one other red blue multicolor card from your hand, and if you do, you draw a card, right? So that's really neat. Obviously, it creates like a 30k combo on its own with most of the cards in your deck. And then its activate main is if you have 2 or more energy and you have a red blue multicolored Frieza clan in your energy, you can play this card for 1 from your hand. So it's pretty cool. It gives you a way to self awaken, though I've learned with this deck to just not take the self awaken. Patrick did teach me force your opponent to take every single one of your life, and he's absolutely right. There's almost no scenario where I'd want to self awaken. Maybe those like minute scenarios where your opponent's desperately trying to double strike you from 5 to 3, so they keep leaving you at 5. That might be a scenario where you take yourself to 4 so you can start arriving. Or there's a scenario where you take yourself to 4 so you can start punching your opponent because they're playing too passive. But like other than that, just force your opponent to take all your life. To go with this Frieza, we're now playing this Whis. Angel of Universe 7. It could probably be the Vados. They both do the same thing. What we're playing them for is the auto. When this card is used in a combo, from your hand, you get to switch up to one of your energy to active mode, right? So obviously you're only going to combo that from your hand when you combo this Frieza from your hand. So you're going to combo the Frieza, you're going to use the ability to combo the Whis and draw a card. Then the Whis will untap an energy. That can be used offensively or defensively. It rarely comes up offensively, except when you really need to clear a threat. So that's really cool. You get to use like an enabler without having to spend like a beer super combo or spend one of your really useful rivals. And then I chose the Whis over the Vados because the Whis is sometimes a blocker negate. Like you can pay 2 to get attack and then it's a blocker after. That rarely comes up as well. There were some times where you're just in a desperate situation where I just tap 2 to combo the Whis and then to turn it into an enabler and then untap 1 and then use that 1 energy to revive something. You play around with it, decide how you like it. The 4th copy oftentimes got sided out if I felt like the opponent was just too fast of a deck, if that makes sense. And then I also charged a 4th copy, like 1 copy of this Frieza oftentimes, just because you're going to need mono red charge, right? Unless you're finding this one check land that I pointed out earlier, every other charge is going to be mono red. Or like you're in a scenario where you had to charge a different red blue turn 1 and then you got to charge a check land later, like the rest of that after that would be mono red. So that's something you just have to get used to. If you notice, I'm not playing any other check lands in this deck list, and that's on purpose because I want every card to be live. I didn't want to play check lands just because I could combo them with this card. Because every time I combo this card, I want to be comboing Whis, effectively turning these Whis into Beerus's 4, 5, or 5, 6, 7, and 8. So yeah, so you want to look for a copy of this, this, and this in your opening hand, which is asking a lot, I know. But you can kind of make anything work. And then if you have like the dream opening hand of these 4 cards, you can look for a Hercule Majin Buu. A lot of people are cutting Hercule Majin Buu from their deck. I just think that's wrong. Yes, it falters the Koitsukai, but like just don't play it when they play Koitsukai. I know that sounds like really crass, but you want to play Hercule Majin Buu whenever you have the opportunity, right? And you just don't play it when they have Koitsukai. And if they do Koitsukai, you can always combo it away with this Frieza. But the Hercule Majin Buu is just so plus. Like they mill 1, you draw 2 if you haven't triggered your leader effect yet, so that's really strong. And on the Awaken turn, I can't think of a better card I'd want. It's still just so powerful to like combo Frieza, combo to the Whis with the Frieza effect, arrival Hercule Majin Buu, Awaken, and then arrival Hercule Majin Buu again. That's like a draw. I think it's like a draw 6 on your opponent's turn during your Awaken. That's really strong. And then if you have Bursting Rage, you can Bursting Rage and then combo another Hercule Majin Buu to draw another 3 or another 4 for that turn. It's just like the card is just nuts. It does sometimes get sided out. It's like one of the first cards to go along with the Whis, and I just sided down to 2 or 3 copies, just because it creates a really strong play if you're attacking, but if you're defending with it, then like you really just want it for your either turn 1 charge, or you really want it for like your Awaken turn. So I was talking about how it creates a really cool offensive play. Let's just talk about that play. So you'll play Frieza for 1, right? You'll attack with Frieza. Frieza will allow you to combo the Whis, which will let you draw a card, right? So that the Whis replaces itself, and then you'll use that, or the Whis will untap the energy that you spend on the Frieza. Now you spend that energy on the Hercule Majin Buu. So the Majin Buu draws a card for its own effect, and then the Majin Buu attacks or whatever. So, and then at the end of the turn, the Majin Buu returns the Frieza to back to your hand, which is super cool. So you actually went absolutely even in card economy here, and maybe milled your opponent by one and dealt 2 or 3 damage this turn. So that's a really cool play if you needed to take advantage of some aggression, and you still have 1 energy up at the end of all of that, right? Which is exactly where Cooler wants to be. You want to be with like 1 or 2 energy up most of the time early game. Then once you get to the late game, and you start developing threats that don't need to take all of your energy. You can just start passing with 4 or 5 energy up, and your opponent, it's just so difficult for your opponent to kill you, even under Koitsukai. So those are our early game keeps, and what we're really looking to do between turns 1, 2, and pretty much up until we awaken. Let's talk about some of the rest of our arrival package. All 4 copies of the cooler. I mean, it's just the ignore barrier mill 3 cooler if you use it in the right scenarios. Because if you hit 2 battle cards, it also mills 1, right? Then your leader forces them to mill 2. So that's really cool. Oftentimes, I'll find myself charging 1 copy of this because I just need that Frieza clan and the energy. But in a better scenario, I'd rather charge one of these. This is the enabler slash blocker arrival. Also super good. It sometimes goes +1 for you. I guess technically +2 if you count the advantage on board. But more importantly, it's a blocker and it ignores barrier on its mill. So like between these 2 cards, you can knock out a 25k, right? Obviously, the weakness of these cards is that they fall to Koitsukai. So like you kind of have to play them early. You kind of force yourself to arrive stuff early before they can get Koitsukai going. That way, when they finally do get Koitsukai going, you're only relying on your big arrivals. Speak. Excuse me. Speaking of big arrivals, the new Checkland is also a big arrival. He's a 25k arrival for 2, and he ignores barrier once again, and negs something by 20k. That's half of most cards' power, if not more, right? And then the other big arrival I now play 2 copies of is Suffocating Tyranny. It just minus 25k is a big deal. It mills 1 on its own when it comes down. And like if your opponent's not generating a board, this is just the best card. You can play this for 3. It mills 1, then you attack and it mills 1, whether they have a board or not. So that's really strong. And of course, you can bounce it back to your hand to untap 1, setting you up for a future turn. So talking about that card and why we play 2 copies of it. Remember that play I just showed you with the Frieza into Boo? Well, you can do something just as equally powerful with the cooler Suffocating Tyranny on turn 3. Arguably even more powerful because this kills almost any battle card that doesn't have barrier if it comes down uncontested. So same deal, you just play Frieza for 1. You attack with the Frieza, combo the Whis. The Whis the Frieza draws 1 for comboing Whis. The Whis untaps the energy you spent for playing the Frieza, so you're back at 3 energy. You rival the cooler Suffocating Tyranny, minus 25 something, hopefully, and then mill them 1 regardless. Then you attack with the Suffocating Tyranny, finish off whatever is left on their board if they have anything left, and then you mill them for 1 anyway, regardless after that. And then at the end of the turn, you return the cooler back to your hand and untap 1, leaving you ready to defend your life. That's why we play 2 copies. It's just nice to be able to see this by 3. If we're like going second, this card on 3 is really good to catch up in the game. If we're going first, obviously we want to slam the Unison. But this and Cell Max are just so good for going second. Different options to claw back the board is the way I see it. And then finally, the honorary arrival target, 2 copies of Son Gohan fighting the Android Terror. It's really important to remember that this card can affect Unisons because that can get you out of some death blows. And then after you're at 4 life or less, of course, you can arrive this card, and it becomes a way to, well, I say arrive, but like you can just play this card for 1 without having to spend an enabler, and it can draw you a card, right? It's also just a 5k combo after, which is kind of a pain when you arrive some of these other guys because you have to pay 1 to combo them off. So I like this card a lot. Unfortunately, I cut him down to 2 because I just found myself charging him a lot early game. But when he does come up, he comes up, right? So that's why we did it. Obviously, 4 beer super combo is still the staple of this deck. This deck lives and dies by how many untappers you see. It's just nice now that instead of only 4 untappers, we also have access to 4 Whis with the freezes, of course. I mean, it takes 2 cards to create what Beerus does for us, but it's just so good. As a habit, if you have both of these in your hand, I would use the freezes earlier and then save the Beeruses for later, mainly because the freezes are limit 1, so you don't want to be caught in a scenario where you have to untap multiple times in a combat step and you are stuck with just multiple Whis and freezes, right? Like you just want to cycle these out of your hand. This becomes Z energy super early, and then you can just save the Beeruses for those scenarios where you need to untap a couple times. In addition to the Beerus for extra untap capability, of course, we're playing 4 beans. They just combo with the Frieza slash Whis combo to give you an extra energy to arrive with. They combo with the Beerus to give you an extra energy to arrive with. They create a little floodgate by making you 5k higher. I mean, this deck is unaffected by the errata bean. In fact, it probably helped this deck because now the deck doesn't have to face blue aggro as badly. Talking about some of our non-cooler cards that still help out cooler. 3 copies of Baby Juvenile Parasite. I mean, it's a board removal card. Like, you might think this is counterproductive because you're like, why am I removing battle cards when I can just mill through the battle cards? I mean, that's sort of true. Sometimes battle cards are too tall, and you just need to remove the threat so that you can force your opponent to generate more threats. That's actually just more efficient than trying to kill them like strictly through milling all their battle cards. You're gonna run out of enablers if you do that. So Baby obviously is super thick unison in the fact that if as long as your opponent has a battle card, it's effectively +2, right? Because you're gonna +1 draw your card, and then you're gonna eat their battle card, and that becomes a security for this unison. Also, just tucking a Baby unison under this is a +2 because you're gonna give it a marker by tucking, and then it has the protection from having something underneath. So that's pretty cool to use as well. It's a 3-drop unison triggering Videl, and of course the difference between Yamcha and Videl is that Yamcha doesn't trigger your leader's draw, but Videl does since it's in the auto step and it's considered a battle card. So that's something to think about too. Videl oftentimes gets charged or sided out to 2 just because like every time you pick up Cooler, you just have to play or you have to build your deck and side in your mind with the worst case scenario in mind. And the worst case scenario in mind is everybody's playing 3 or 4 Koitsukai, right? Whether they are or they not, you have to play into that. Because if they don't have the Koitsukai, you're in a really good spot anyway, and then your deck building choices don't matter. But if they do have the Koitsukai, you got to make sure you're putting yourself in the best possible scenario where your hand isn't completely dead to the Koitsukai. Therefore, like you almost only get to resolve like one Videl game. By the time you've slammed Baby, you're like on turn 3, and your opponent's either on turn 3 or 4. At which point they're ready to start using Koitsukais, and Videl is no longer useful. So that's something to think about as well. Baby being a 20k attack is super relevant. Like I said, we're no longer just trying to mill our opponents to death. Every turn we get, as soon as our opponent's board is clear, we're just going at face. Like we're killing them, right? But until that happens, of course, we're just dealing with board. One of the best cards in the champions of this deck now is Cell Max Return of Despair. It's a 25k attacker, super relevant, lets you clear battle cards or lets you poke at your opponent's life. It's a dual blocker, probably the most relevant stat in this, or most important fact about this card in this deck, because you just need something to block leaders and then block unisons. And once you block those two, your opponent is forced to either pass the turn or create a battle card, right? Like, and that's what you want. You want your opponent to create battle cards. And then additionally, if they do remove this card through a battle card effect or through any effect, and then they happen to have your opponent has a battle card, this card minuses 30 that target. Like it's just so good. And of course, they mill 1 in that scenario, and you're just sitting pretty. It costs 1 energy for a threat, so if you're going second, it's a great stabilization card. You can play this for 1. You can attack over whatever the threat they put out on their 3, which isn't something too big because you were only on 2. And then it restands. You can leave 2 energy up to try to stabilize the game, and you've already done a great turn. Like that's a successful cooler turn. And if that doesn't sound fun to you, you should probably play a different deck. Because we're not here to show off cool combos on our turn. We're here to show off cool combos on our opponent's turn. And then something Patrick, shout out again to this guy, man. He's been putting in the time with Cooler Mill after I like moved on from the deck, but he's just taught me so much watching play with the deck. When Cell Max blocks the first time, some people will try to kill it so they can safely play their battle cards. It is absolutely worth comboing up to save this card if it's not too inefficient for you, right? Because then this card always threatens to trade for your opponent's battle card, and that's what you want. You want to just keep your opponent's board clear so that the rest of your game is just poking your opponent until they either lose all their life or give up, or in the best case scenario, start slamming battle cards so they can fight back, in which case you're in a winning position anyway. Let's talk about the last 2 cards I'm playing. If you'll notice, this is my only hard counter attack in the entire game, and it's not or in the entire deck, and it's not even a hard counter attack. It's after image technique. You know, we want to be in combo steps the entire game. That's what we want to do. There's only so few scenarios where I don't want to be in the combo step, and that's when a leader attack is coming in or a unison attack is coming in. And that's why we have Cell Max. That's why we have blockers in the Z deck. Like, otherwise, we want to be fighting. This after image technique is just a emergency button. Obviously, under Koitsukai, it's really good because you don't have to spend an arrival, and then hopefully we have the energy to arrive our bigger arrivals to get around Koitsukai. So that's why I just play the one. It's like the emergency counterattack. I was playing two for a little bit, but I just found myself charging one so often that I was like, I'm just gonna cut it out for something better. And then of course our SCR of choice, Bursting Rage to play the. It's just the new hotness. I'm gonna be honest. I was there at the regional this weekend, and I think over half the room was playing this card. This card does way too much. In many ways, it's a fifth super combo in your deck. It's a plus 20 draw card, right, for 0 energy. For so many decks, that's all they need. And then if you do have a Z leader, like it just becomes so much better. It plays your Z leader. If you played it on your opponent's turn, like if you activated Bursting Rage on your opponent's turn, you get to keep your Z leader until the end of your turn. And it summons your Z leader for free, which is super relevant because our Z leader costs 1 and sucks. So it's good that our Z leader actually goes away at the end of the turn. It creates a floodgate if you have that Z leader for 25Ks or higher, which is super relevant versus Go Bros, versus Fu, versus Prismatic, versus Vegito, versus Android 21, the set 21. Like, you just pick a deck, and this card's floodgate is just so relevant. Versus, I think this card is just the new hotness. And then if you're playing a Z leader in your deck that has a double strike, this also doubles as a 20K Champa for 0, right? That drew a card. Like, it's nuts to me how slept on that card was. So that's the entire main deck. You know we're only playing 50. I do everything I can to squeeze every deck down to 50 cards, unless it's something that's just going to deck itself, like Golden Frieza or Vegex. So let's move on into the Z deck so you can finally see some of the new stuff we're playing. Obviously, we're playing the 10 times Kamehameha Mighty Blast. This is just one of the best Z extras in the game amongst all the colors. I never thought I would say that about a red card. And it's because this one gives you 15k power. Cooler is struggling for combo power. And to turn one of your free Z energy that you got early game with the Friezas into a 15k combo power card is just so good. Right? When you attacked with this Frieza or you comboed with this Frieza, it turned your Whis into a free Z energy. Excuse me, I had to check my door real quick. Turns your Whis into a free Z energy, which you can later contribute to this card. And then, of course, you're always in the combo step. You're trying to combo to arrive stuff, so you're generating Z energy all the time. And just having 3 Z energy and this red mana second ability where you can minus a battle card by 25k, which of course mills in 1 card. You don't draw for it, but it mills in 1 card. But it's a 40k combo versus any battle card that doesn't have barrier, and you draw a card. That's such a good investment for a Z card. Patrick Derulo's tech. Or Derillo's. I'm sorry, man, if I'm just masticating your name. 2 copies of Android 17, Impeccable Defense. Obviously, I like the card because it references my favorite archetype. But more importantly, it is just such a good card. It's a barrier blocker that blocks twice on your opponent's turn. That's just so strong. If a deck doesn't have an easy way to remove this, so like obviously you're not going to cast this into Prismatic. You're not going to cast this into like Green Gohan because both decks just clear this card so easily. But like almost every deck that's not those decks have to do something really dumb to get rid of this card, and that's what you want. You want to throw off your opponent's game and make the puzzle really hard for them to solve, right? So this card is just so good. It blocks the leader for you, and then you activate battle to restand, and then you can block the unison, similar to how the Cell Max works for you in this deck. But this card stays at 25, and it just always has barrier. So card's nuts. Obviously, the 3Z cost is kind of steep, but it's worth the investment. It just saves your hide so often. And then our threat in the deck is the 3 copies of Rush Attack SSB Vegeta. In this deck, it just does way too much. It not only does it attack, and then it minuses 15 something. It combos, right, and minuses 15 something. Because you minus 15 and it's a battle card, you get to mill your opponent for 1, and then if it's the first time you milled them, or first time you reduce one of their battle cards, it also draws you cards. So for 2 energy, you milled them for 1, probably cleared a threat and drew a card, and then maybe if you're lucky, you get to swing again to pressure your opponent or clear another card and mill another card. Like, the card does so much in this deck. That's why we're playing 3 copies. If you just find yourself with nothing to do, you're not going to play a card from your hand. You're just going to play this card, swing, clear, move on. And then, of course, our Z leader to round out the Z deck. This card it's not great. I'm not gonna lie. You don't get an increase in power for Z Awakening, even though your Z Awakening costs an energy and 2 Z energy. You actually stop drawing on attack, so you're not you're not drawing any more than if you were just on this leader, right? You're just turning the draw two from the front from your turn to your opponent's turn. What you give up drawing on the front or drawing on attack to go to draw two the first time you mill your opponent on your backs or on your opponent's turn. And then it's got this activate main where you can tap 5 to play a Frieza 5 and a Cooler 5, and then at the end of the turn untap 2. That's really cool, but I think if you're in a situation where you can do that and it's valuable, you probably already won the game through any other combination of cards in your hand, right? So if you notice, I don't even play the Frieza 5 in the main. It's just there's so many decks where it's not coming up, and it just sits in your hand as a dead card. So this card really only comes down during Bursting Rage. That's it. And you can use it as an opportunity to draw an extra couple cards with Bursting Rage once you trigger Bursting Rage. Launching in the side deck is a lot of obviously small things that we tuned in the side deck to for this format. So the one copy to Jiren for those blue decks like the Android 17. It's really the only way blue decks kill you is if they turning the Taiju. Otherwise, you're gonna mill them down, or you're just gonna outpressure them. Their leaders are never gonna connect because they don't have a good way to clear cell max. Beerus is the only way they clear cell max, and you get to kill Beerus with any of your rivals, right? Other than that, like their ways to clear cell max aren't very efficient. One copy of the Final Guardian for hand control. Obviously, this deck's worst masterpiece hand control. So if we just have good cards that we can discard, and it's a hard negate for their double strike leaders like the Gohan deck, card comes up. 3 copies of Deborah for the aforementioned hand control. 1 copy of like full power freeze 100% overdrive. This card I boarded for that yellow starter deck coup. And then I was talking to Patrick after, and he's like, dude, just play Wolfang. So I'm going to try some Wolfangs out, and then if that works out, I probably just won't play this card ever again. Like I said, it's really a pipe dream to play off the Z leader. It never works out. Like I said, if you're killing them with this, you're probably killing them with anything else either. But it looks cool. So 2 copies of Whis, Angel's Teaching. This was for Golden Frieza or any like really unison based deck, or any deck that just goes like super wide, like the Starter Coup deck, right? Like you can arrive this card and then discard the card, and then suddenly like their super wide board does nothing. So I didn't really like it in the main. I don't want cards that just are check lands or maybe have a use afterwards. Like this doesn't really have a use unless your opponent's going super wide or plays a bunch of unisons. 2 copies of Oceanus. This is pretty much just for yellow. It's because their counter or their like counterplay for this isn't very efficient unless they use cooler. So that's what this is for. And of course decks that like just go aggro super heavy. Obviously I didn't play in the main because like Koitsukai. You're gonna hear me say that like every time I think of a card, right? Like if you notice I didn't play testing the opposition in the main or anywhere in my list, it's because of Koitsukai. Like if people are gonna already Koitsukai, you don't want to play cards that are just weaker to Koitsukai as well. A copy of Black Smoke Dragon, Accumulated Negativity. I can see myself playing 2 copies of this as we move forward. The Bardock Unison in green decks is going to be more and more popular in my opinion, and this card just knocks that card out, right? And obviously that card's a problem for you because the combo area is where you live. 1 copy of Pilaf versus 21. It's just a respect card. I think when I'm building a side deck for any of my decks right now, unless I'm building it for set 2021, I start with like the cunning for that color and then 14 other cards. 1 copy of Pilaf Shumai Cunning Trio for any deck that can play the cooler SCR. A 2nd copy of After Image Technique for decks where like I needed to snuff out the leader swing because my blockers couldn't block him. So like Bardock Prismatic, this card comes up quite a bit. Their leader swing taps your cell max, so you can't block with it, and then their Z card removes your Android 17 Z battle card. So you never really get to block their leader swing, and they can be playing Kraken Space Time, so you don't want to just lose to that for no reason. And then 1 copy of Ultimate Dark Dragon Slaying Bullet for Unison based decks, really. That's the entire 65 plus Z deck. It was so much fun to be able to play Cooler Mill again at a major event. And I was just 1 mistake away from being in a much better position to win out the event. But 4th is a good finish for this deck. It definitely feels like a deck that can win it all, as long as the pilot is competent enough to keep up with it. Yeah, but as usual, shout out to my boys at PPG, my boys in Fort Walton Beach. Honestly, shout out to most importantly, shout out to all the guys I get to hang out with and everybody I say hi to at these events. It's really fun talking to you guys and just talking about deck ideas and things you come up with and just looking at your decks and maybe like tinkering together. Deck building's my favorite part of this game, right? So like somebody this weekend came up to me with questions about Invoker, and it was super fun to relive those that deck and like kind of work on it with him. And hopefully, I'm really hoping he succeeds with that deck. So yeah, it's been super fun doing this deck profile for you. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, and I will catch you guys at Nationals.